One of the most surprising things in life is the sudden realization that you have become old. Settle down, you're going to be okay. A Trotsky quote can't hurt you, might even help you. God, it's amazing how fast time goes. Of course, it's documented by so many brilliant people, maybe Jim Croce at the top of that list. I was about 28, 29, 30 when this bobblehead was molded after me. Roughly the age that in my brain I still think I am. We all have that number where we think we're something, but deep down we know we're not, probably because there are plenty of roadside fires to remind us that there is more asphalt in our rear view than in our front view. You got knees that sound like Jiffy Pop burning on an electric stove. If you scroll through your messages, you come across more and more friends who are no longer here. You might recognize only 3 bands on the Coachella poster. What did Beverly Sills say? In youth, we run into difficulties, but in old age, difficulties run into us. One of the big things is seeing a bunch of teenagers walking down the street who just picked at the bones, your pre-arthritic bones of your youth. This is not new. Every generation faces this final boss. But if you're part of that Gen X, elder, millennial window, you're living it right now because you see it all around you on the streets. And also because maybe it reminds you that we may have summited. Because while it is true that every era had its thing, gotta love the boomers. They had 1965 to 69. That is biblical. It's just that we had so many things. Think about this. If you were born in the early to mid 70s, you were coming of age as in no particular order: rap, hip hop, alternative, punk, post-punk, metal, new wave, house, acid house, techno, the rave culture that set the stage for EDM, just so all those artists can go on stage and play shows without even plugging in their decks. And then the evolutions inside all of that with alternative, it's indie and more of the golden age of hip hop and drum and bass and jungle. There's so much more you could put in the comments. Thrash, death, and black metal, the list is mega. And then we had the rise of college and community radio plus zines. All of that in the 1980s bloomed into a network of rebellion and innovation in the 1990s. It was a home for misfits, both bands and listeners. All this happening under the real world fear of sexual awakening in the age of AIDS and the threat of nuclear devastation. For some reason, we were afraid of quicksand in the effing Bermuda Triangle. It was also a time of great optimism. The Berlin Wall came down. Apartheid was going to end, well, at least in South Africa. Mandela would be free. The old didn't seem inevitable. The future actually felt unwritten. And when I think about that blip in time and how interesting it was, I spend more and more time realizing that it was because all those things were happening at the same time. I could do a whole video just on movies of that era. Actually, I want to tie that into music here. When you have all this energy happening in different disciplines, all that intention in different areas, they often find themselves and then bind themselves into a scene where the sadness and the madness and the gladness of a moment in time forms its codes and its symbols, and it ignites a common language that first gets shared internally, but then with the whole world. And you know that when there are disaffected youth, someone's going to try to cash in, like make a movie. Ever seen a Hollywood movie about rave culture? Seems kind of whack, doesn't it? Or as the kids would call it, cringe. There was one, It's All Gone Pete Tong, made by Canadian director Michael Dowse. It was great. Another Canadian made another great one. Alan Moyle did it with Pump Up the Volume. Grim and irreverent, just like us. He also made Empire Records. Let's stay on records. Well, actually, a record. Usually when we do this, I pull out an obscure or lesser known album, but I want to pull out one that was very successful, sold over 2 million copies. You might still have it. You could probably find it at a used record store, depending on the condition, $40 to $60. God, I love physical media. Back in the day, if you were poor, you couldn't afford to go out and do anything. You would lay down with somebody you liked and you would just play records for each other. But in a mountain of subscription fees, if you let that subscription lapse, what are you going to do? Now we're just renting our culture from tech landlords. Don't get me wrong. I do love streaming. I do. It's been brilliant for convenience and it's freed up my storage space. And it does give you the access to everything, but it also ran the risk of turning albums into digital vapor. Once there's a licensing dispute or some algorithm or some artist decides they want to just change the lyrics, it can just disappear. These records are a physical artifact. They cannot be deleted or altered or wiped out from an EMP. We've talked a lot about poring over liner notes like a communion, but these days, it feels like an act of resistance. This soundtrack is one of the best soundtracks of all time because it does capture a very specific time with a very specific sound from a very specific place. But it is more than that. It's a Generation X Rosetta Stone. The movie was fine. The movie was good. It was part of a moment. There was a lot of hype, but the soundtrack was the truth. Pure royal jelly from the hive. No movie could live up to this soundtrack, though it did have cameos from two gods of the era. That alone made it awesome. And you got to give much respect to the director. He wrote Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He directed Say Anything with the best teen romantic gesture ever. For a generation raised on the brightness and pop of the 80s, now wrestling with economic gloom and political cynicism, don't let the rewriters of history fool you. Reagan and Thatcher, F the kids. This soundtrack was the raw, unfiltered sound of your interior world. It was not happy. It was moody. It was introspective. It was pissed off. It was disconnected. It was drenched in fuzz and feedback, but it was real. And it gave voice to that angst. Very different from the rom-com film it represented, but it had some of the most important vocalists of the last half century. If you check out the lineup now, it blows your mind. Jimi Hendrix, Mudhoney, Screaming Trees, Smashing Pumpkins, Mother Love Bone, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden before they were big. The movie was shot months before Pearl Jam's 10 and Nirvana's Nevermind came out. Nirvana passed on being a part of this. They felt like it would have been a bit too commercial. The studio tried, though. They even talked about naming the movie Come As You Are. They didn't need to, because singles became the communal campfire for a generation. And the tragedy woven into these tracks is staggering. Andrew Wood of Mother Love Bone, gone in 1990, before the explosion. I think he was the star that exploded, that set it all in motion. Alice in Chains, Lane Staley, a primal, beautiful voice, gone in 2002, a haunting presence, forever captured in Wood. Chris Cornell, the powerhouse. When Chris died in 2017, it felt like the sun going out on an era. And then there was Mark Landigan of the Screaming Trees. Mark was the grizzled, graveled-voiced poet of the scene. Died in 2022. 4 foundational artists from one soundtrack, all gone before their time. Addiction, despair, and the crushing weight of it all. Their very intensity that made the art so vital, so necessary to help us navigate life, ultimately consume them. Now, when you listen to this record, it feels like you're listening to it in a hall of ghosts. So why does this album matter today? Beyond the nostalgia, which certainly has impact. It is a perfect bittersweet time capsule that did get lightning in a bottle for sure. Raw energy, camaraderie, the sheer potential of a scene that changed music. But it also, unknowingly, captured the fragility. Sheila Watson wrote this: when you capture twice the glory, you hook twice the fear. Or in this case, twice the glory, but you only get half the time. This is Generation X's defining artifact precisely because of this duality. The defiant noise, the boundless energy of youth, the profound loss, the anthems for disconnection, and the proof of how deeply connected those voices were to our own fractured lives, with the names of Wood and Staley and Cornell and Lanigan. Play it loud, capture the time, and mourn the loss. Celebrate the talent. Everything that rises must fall, but remember what Flannery O'Connor said. Everything that rises must also converge, and for me at least, it converged in the single soundtrack. Oh, and keep an eye on your friends. Check in with them, because that's another sign of getting old, is that when you don't, you might miss the fragility and the cracks starting to form. Love your people.